Well, Andy, welcome to the Webmethod Unplugged podcast. Appreciate you taking the time, calling us all the way from Canada. How's the weather? Must be a little chilly right now, right?
It's cold and there's lots of snow here. We got snow early. So, Robert, thanks very much for having me and happy to be here and chat with you a little bit and, talk security and AI and all kinds of stuff.
Oh, fantastic. And that's great because the theme for today is AI, identity, and acceleration, and how agentic AI is transforming security and RFP efficiency, which you have actually a very good use case and build out to talk about. So, but before I go into that, I'd like to kind of introduce the listeners to Andy Frankel, currently an IBM Gold business partner, works in IBM AI and hybrid cloud. You've got automation projects across government, finance, logistics, and energy. You are the creator of an AI-powered MIRE application and experienced with QRadar and currently RFPs involving IBM Verify. So, I mean, that's quite the list of accomplishments and achievements. Anything else you want to add to that?
Well, so we have a long history. SIE Innovations has been around 48 years. The founder still the president, and we started off as ISVs. We built some software, ERP software for small businesses. When merrily we rolled along, if you will, up until about 2000, and it ran on IBM hardware. So we became an IBM business partner as a result of that. And then in around 2000, 2001, when you know the market for ERP software went pretty soft because everyone was just worried about year 2000. And then when it finished, everyone went, woof, it's done. And then, of course, in 2001, the economy tanked. So the dot-com bust. And we said, what are we going to do to grow the business? We moved into the IBM software arena and sort of became integrators of IBM software for customers. As IBM moved into the phase around 2015, 16, where they started to get more into cloud and SaaS and AI and so on, we evolved again into more of a business transformation consulting organization. And so this is what leads us to touch on a broad variety of areas: AI, work automation, security, business integration, a whole slew of different things, and has given us an opportunity to work with small and large clients in lots of different industries and so on. And myself personally, so I've been with SIA as one of the principals for almost 30 years. And then before that, I started my career at a little known company called Arthur Anderson and Company, which today is called Accenture. So I was there for 10 years and also had some time in private industry. So a lot of varied experience and a lot of different things that we touch on. Happy to talk about any one of them.
Well, and I was going to say that is quite the history and reputation that you carry, Andy. I'm super grateful that you've been able to pull time out of your schedule to come and chat today. So I guess we'll start out with the opening question that kind of drove this whole conversation, which is you know how did you get started in AI and security? Like essentially as you walk that path and all of these different steps have led you to where you are. What was the pivotal point where you're like, okay, it's now time to move into this AI thing? Because that's really what it is when you first get into, at least that's how it was for me. I'm like, okay, what is this AI thing and what can I do with it? And, Chat GPT and Grok and all of these other, LLMs that exist out there. And then you hear about, the machine learning portion of all of this. And you're like, okay, it's time. Like, what was that? What was the driver for that?
So a couple of things. So first of all, from a security standpoint, it's more of a almost like a funny story than a strategic one, in the sense that here we are, we're based in Montreal, Canada, and we do business across Canada. We do some business in the US and we do some business in the English Caribbean. And here locally, they had no partners in security. And so they said, hey, can you guys help us out? And we always, whenever we were designing solutions for customers, always looking at, you know, the infrastructure aspects, the security aspects, the business resiliency aspects. So it was natural for us at a business level to look at security when they said, we don't really have partners. Can you train up on QRadar and some of the other tools, Mass 360 and so on? We said, sure, right? It's sort of a natural extension of what we do for customers. And every project has some element of security wrapped around the solution that you're building and delivering to clients. And I would say one of our first exposures to AI was through the security advisor for QRadar, where it wasn't so much an AI tool on its own, but AI baked into the solution for end users to just consume it. And it made a lot of sense because you SOC analysts just cannot afford to analyze all the events and all the potential threats, and there's just too much, right? So
Yep.
you need this technology to help. There were some other products that IBM offered around fraud analysis and management, and so slowly in the early days of AI we were exposed to this, and we saw the future. We said we need to be in AI in a big way as transformation consultants, and started to build our team, and started to build our knowledge and skills, and started to build strategy. Our president is quite visionary in that respect, and he said, "I see the future, and the future is AI." And our differentiating factor will be our ability to help customers leverage AI to drive productivity, agility, business resiliency, and all of these factors. And so that's really where we started.
As you've adopted it and as you've helped customers adopt AI, what changes have you seen in how organizations think about AI? Because I can tell you, like the first time, like I remember I was sitting actually at ASU, and there was a professor there who he'd come to an event, and it was actually had nothing to do with AI. It was a CRO event of all things. And this professor was there, and him and I started chatting, and he'd asked me, and this was, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and he said, "Hey, have you done anything with AI?" And I said, "No, I didn't even know where to begin," right? And then that's what I told him. I said, "I have no idea what to do with this thing." And he said, "Well, why don't you ask it?" And, like, that was my, like, moment, right? Where I was like, "What do you mean, ask it?" He's like, "Go ask it what it can do for you." And I did, and I was like, why not?" So I got home that night, popped open the computer, and I just had a full-on conversation with this machine. And then I realized, started understanding context, right? Giving it information and letting it know, "Hey, this is what I'm trying to do. This is who I am. Like, how, what ways are you built that you can help accelerate what I'm doing?" And like, it was like Christmas. I was like, "Holy Hannah, this is amazing." And and it was funny because I showed it to my wife, I showed it to my daughter, and they're like, "Is this real?" And I'm like, "Yes, isn't this insane?" Anyway, sorry. So back to the question that was my change. What changes have you seen in terms of clients and orgs in how they perceive AI?
I've been in the business 41 years, and I have never seen change as much and as rapid as I have seen in the last 6, 12, 18 months in the area of AI. When we first started experimenting and playing and looking at it,
Yep,
AI was machine learning, it was data scientists, it
yep,
was you had to build models, right? This is predating Gen AI. It was about building models to solve problems. It was about gathering data and labeling the data. So you had data scientists, and all the data scientists they spent 80% of their time preparing the data to run them through the models, right? To train the models, and so on. This was the start, and it was tough at an enterprise level to find the use cases, because back then we saw the use cases more in deep financial analysis or healthcare, genome theories, and all kinds of stuff like that, which we're not involved in, right?
yep.
Where were the practical applications for business, right? I guess the first aha moment was along came IBM Watson Assistant. And all of a sudden, you had this intelligent chatbot that you could interact with. And we also started playing a little bit with the core Watson services, the text to speech, the translation, the sentiment analysis to see what we could do with it. And again, IBM had a lot of good, they had the core services that you could build applications with, but they also had consumable products like Watson Assistant, Watson Discovery. So we worked with one customer who had a fairly large organization, about 10,000 users, and they had their IT help desk was being inundated with calls from users who needed help on Microsoft 365. So
Oh,
we built them a chat bot, and it reduced like 80% of the calls that they got, right? As people could chat with the chat bot 24/7 and ask questions about how to use Microsoft 365. Those calls never had, only a select number of them had to go through and have them talk with an actual live agent. So very simple use case,
yeah.
and yet very powerful return on investment. It won awards here in Quebec. So
Well,
and it
congratulations.
was
That's
it
fun.
was
That's
that was
definitely
so that was
fun, right?
yeah. So that was a first. I'm gonna say a first aha moment. The other thing is, and I know we'll talk about our MIR application. MIR is an acronym for Multi Industry Recommendation Engine. But
Thank you for
essentially,
reminding me on the pronunciation of that because I would have kept spelling it out the rest of this, the rest
no
of this
worries, no
dialogue.
worries. So it's interesting because when we did presentations that do text to speech, I'd actually spell it MERE so that when the bot pronounced it, it pronounced it mirror and not Meyer. So,
Ah,
but
yep.
just anecdote. But the evolution of working with that product itself was also, again, talking toward the evolution of how we've seen things change is we started building the product with Watson Studio before IBM announced at think 2023, I think it is, down in Orlando, Watson X and the
Yeah.
use of LLMs.
Yep.
And all of a sudden, we literally had to rethink how we were going to work with Mir, right? Instead of building the models, we had LLMs to leverage. Merrily, we go along, and then all of a sudden, the introduction of agentic AI. And that again has radically evolved thinking of how to go about things. So this is what IBM calls going from plus AI to AI plus, which is
Yep.
not just building solutions and then adding some layer of AI to enhance the human. It's the reverse. It's get the AI to do all the work and only ask the humans when it needs help.
That resonated with me. So as I've looked into the different pieces of IBM and how they function, that plus AI, and it's such a simple saying or how to describe that. It is a transfer of understanding in terms of how we do things because previous to that, it was almost bolt on, right? You were bolting it on to whatever product, and they said no, that's not the right way to treat this because you're not going to actually get where you want. It needs to be the brain of the system. It's part of, not subservient to it.
Well, I'll go further than that. So the first AI, I talked about this chatbot
Yeah.
that we built. The first AI was addressing the inputs and the outputs. So Watson Assistant, how do you interact with a user to understand and translate what he's asking for? And then how do you interact with the backend data to be able to provide information? What agentic AI does is it transforms what happens in the middle, which is the human process of reasoning and decision making. This is a fundamental shift in how you look at AI. And this is where you can start to look at no, I need to train an electronic workforce of AI agents to do work. And then they just need to consult with the humans when there is experience, intuition, creativity, all the things that AI can't necessarily do. That's where
Yeah.
you bring in the humans in to add value. But it fundamentally changes how processes work and how things get done. So that's the other radical shift. And we're heading toward this augmented general intelligence, which is the seventh stage of AI. We're on our way, to get there 2030 or something like that. So
Yeah. And it's interesting as these conversations evolve in terms of the speed at which we're moving. We started with the LLMs, and then we moved into AI, and then moved into agentic AI. It almost feels like we're speeding up, and it's orders of magnitude. Not 30 years later, we're like talking months later. And and speaking of speeding things up, which is I think a perfect segue into Mirror. Um, why don't you tell us what did you see in the RFP world that Mirror solves? We've kind of alluded to it a little bit. That's actually for those listening, this is the purpose of the conversation today, is actually to talk about Mirror.
So it's interesting because Mir started out not so much as a product we wanted to build and commercialize, but something we wanted to use ourselves.
Yeah,
We recognize that for SIA to continue to grow, we need to do a couple of things. We need to have tools to make ourselves more productive, and
yeah,
we need to build tools and intellectual property that can help our customers be more productive. And this is how we can differentiate ourselves as IT consultants. And
yep,
so we said we have always answered RFPs, at least here locally and to a certain extent in the Caribbean. Everyone who answers RFPs knows this has the worst ROI possible. I mean, the number of RFPs you have to answer and the percentage that you win is low, typically 5-10% if you're lucky. And the amount of effort required from your experts. I have a colleague who will tell me if I answer an RFP myself front to back, he says it's a solid 40, 50 hours of work.
yeah,
And when you get an RFP from, especially government, but when you get an RFP, it's 200 pages, 80% of which is a lot of blah, blah instructions and terms and conditions and forms and documents and things like that. 20% is actually what the RFP is problem it's trying to solve. It requires a lot of effort from highly skilled and expensive people who are not always available. And it seems like you're reinventing the wheel every time. So how do you take advantage of past RFPs? So the starting point was for this to be a viable route to market, we have to figure out a way to increase the volume of RFPs we're able to answer.
yeah,
We need to figure out a way to have higher quality responses, and we have to figure out a way to find and select more winnable RFPs. When you bring all of those together, you can increase your volume, increase your win rate, decrease the effort, and also hopefully if you can coordinate the work between multiple people instead of one, well, then you can shrink the elapsed time it takes to answer because typically they give you what, 2, 3, 4 weeks to answer an RFP.
yep,
So it's tight. I know you and I talked, and you said you have some that it's like 2, 3 days. So
yeah.
what
Super fast
what do you
turnaround.
do? So
Super
so
fast
this
turnaround.
yeah. So this was the starting point was how do we help ourselves leverage the
Yeah,
RFP route to market? And so we got to work on it, and then as it developed, we said, this could be interesting for other partners too. So not only can we use it for ourselves, but maybe we can develop something that we can actually go out to marketplace and sell.
yeah. No, and I'll tell you that looking at this solely from a business perspective, you've hit on all of the elements: speed, accuracy. I'd also point out too is you remove the dependency on that individual that you were previously depending on to answer them, right? So you lose that person, that knowledge walks out the door, you now have to replace it. Well, not anymore. And I loved that last piece when you were talking about understanding the winnability. If you think that your winnability is zero, of course you're not going to answer it. But there's always that little bit in the back of your mind where you're like, what if this is the one? What if this is the right RFP that's gonna get us this project that we've been going after? And so I love it. I love it hits all the right elements.
Yeah, it's to be perfectly honest, we're really just starting the process. So we're adopting it as client zero. We're starting to train our people internally that we're starting to answer RFPs using the tool. And it's a journey. You don't expect to have, our hypothesis to start was if we could help say 50 to 60% of the time and effort it takes to respond to an RFP, isn't that worth it, right? We know some organizations, they have 5, 10 people who spend all of their time answering RFPs. Well, if you could save the equivalent of one full-time equivalent, the tool pays for itself in 6 months. So that was the starting point. But you also know that it takes time for AI to learn. We're in version 1 of our product. We're looking for partners who want to join us on the journey. That it starts here and we just keep getting better and better and better because the AI gets better, the leveraging of past successes gets better, because you're able to provide feedback. Hey, we lost this one, and this is why we think we lost it, or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
And so you get better at, and you identify more areas of eligibility that you can test for, so that you can select more winnable RFPs, and so on and so forth. And one of the nice things we built into the tool. So there are tools out in the marketplace which are great, which leverage Watson X. Most of those tools are proposal preparation tools, so they help in the productivity of answering the RFP. We've gone further. We actually leverage, with permission from IBM, to access their database of product documentation. So we actually take the requirements and go out and figure out, and the AI will come back and propose which products you should be proposing in the solution. And then it'll go and answer all the questions in the requirements grid, which is where all the effort from is required. So we're actually helping with the technical solution build, I call it. And the third piece is, we're trying to capture all the metrics. So how many RFPs did you answer in a period? How many did you win? What was the elapsed time? How much effort did you put into it? So that you can actually measure the trends over time and see if you're actually getting an
Yeah.
improved return on investment as you go.
Wow. That's great. Oh man. As a business owner at the end of the day, that's one of the hardest things you have to track is what are the right metrics to go after and how is this bringing me an ROI? And if you can simplify that question and especially having it built right into the dashboard, that's a W, right?
And it's a thing we're learning, as we go, because when we're designing systems and we're taking an agile approach, we're looking at, I'll call it the simple McKinsey model of what's the problem, why is it a problem, and what are the customer's aspirational intentions,
Yeah.
and what are the KPIs used to measure those. Those are all typically human type KPIs. But when you're designing AI solutions, you have to look at it from a different perspective. So what are the outcome based AI goals and what are the agentic AI KPIs? So as an example, in RFPs, your human productivity is, have you increased your win rate by X%?
Yeah.
Whereas in agentic AI, the KPI is how many handoffs between the AI agent and the human are required, and
Yeah.
can you reduce those?
Yep.
You know, can you make it more and more unsupervised? And so the AI is doing more, so that the humans can do less without compromising on the quality.
Yeah. And actually, kind of in that same vein, what are your thoughts about maintaining? So, I mean, maybe not necessarily Mirror, but like all AI tools in general, like especially AI driven tools. How do we ensure they remain secure and trustworthy? I was having a conversation with a client the other day about AI, and they were, looking at the strategy to go put it in, and I said, okay, I'm gonna put you guys on breaks. Just I'm gonna throw some things at you. It, you may not have considered but in this world that you're about to walk into, you need to be aware of. And they said, yeah, like what, because they were talking about efficiencies and gains and all the things that you could do with it. And I said, I'm gonna be a little black rain cloud for a second here, right? And I said, what happens? And this is again a little bit dark. What happens if somebody is feeling suicidal and they come talk to your AI and it's been trained on the wrong set of data? And I said, what happens if your AI is giving out medical advice and it was trained on the wrong set of data? I said, its job is to answer the question. That's what its job is to do based on the data set that it was provided. And it will fight against whatever boundaries have been put into place, because that's just the design of the system. It's ever helpful, ever present, ever trying to be the good, I'm going to say servant, right? And bring you this data, whether right, wrong, or indifferent, it's going to try and bring it to you. And so as I started going down that path, I said, and it doesn't have to be that dark, right? But what about if you've mispermissioned it and now you've given out all of the financials of your company to everybody knows everyone's salaries. That's a very legitimate thing that could happen if you're giving it access to your financial data, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I've given a couple of scenarios. One that I actually created on purpose. So I actually took the Granite model and I started beating it up and I said, "Ooh, I guess kind of coming back to the question, I kind of deviated there a little bit, kind of bringing it back again. What are your thoughts on how do we keep it secure and trustworthy?" And that's an interesting because I think it's a two-part question. The security is one piece, that trustworthy is different.
It's a very good question. It's I'm not sure I have a complete answer to, or I don't know if anyone has an answer to, because it's still like the Wild West, right?
Yeah,
People went out to the Wild West, they settled, they did what they wanted, and then they brought the, the guardrails in afterwards to create a more organized society. It was the same thing with the internet. People needed to be on the internet, they got in, and then they didn't realize, and then they started learning afterwards, unfortunately, the pitfalls. I think it's the same thing with AI. Right now, we're still in the honeymoon phase of discovering all it can do for us.
yeah,
And then you have some of your AI founders and gurus who are now starting to warn us of the things to be wary of. So, that's sort of I call it the first part of the answer. The second is you want to obviously rely on things like security and trustworthiness. You start with the organizations and the tools that you can trust and that are secure. So, and then how do you build some of those guardrails in? Unfortunately, my experience is mostly limited to IBM, but IBM, on one side, they have their Granite models that they've built that they're ready to sign in blood on, that they're going to remain unbiased and trustworthy and so on. On the other side, they built a platform called Watson X Governance, which is a tool that will help you oversee, and that tool will continue to evolve to oversee at least the bias and the drift and the trustworthiness and things like that. Security is an interesting question too, because you hit the nail on the head. It's a function of the data you feed it. Right. So even when you're feeding an LLM and it's refining itself and improving, it doesn't know what is real and not real. And so it starts to adapt its answers based on the data that it's been fed in the past, right? And this is what leads to hallucinations, which is a great term for it. I like that. So
is this
and
us
so
empathizing with the machine a little bit? Like, hey man, it's 5 o'clock on Friday. Like you need to take a break.
Yeah, well, listen, AI never sleeps and never eats. So, and it works 24/7. So how do we now start to look at those things? And part of it is also sensitizing people and organizations who are using AI as to what they have to be careful about, what happens to the data they feed it, and how they should interpret what AI is coming back with. So when it's Gen AI and it's generating content, or if it's agentic AI and it's reasoning and making decisions, you have to constantly go back and look at the reasonableness of the decisions or the content that's generated. You have to fact check. So I don't know if there are technologies that yet can help with that. So there has to be a human part of understanding how you leverage the AI, what you can fairly trust or not. This is what IBM's done a bit with the Granite models. When you start to go from LLMs, which are very broad, generalized models, to much more, they call them small language models, less parameters, much more purpose driven, and trained more for a specific area, then hopefully that helps in it's got a much smaller purpose, but maybe it has much more accurate content and you can rely on it more too.
Well, no, I appreciate that. And so in that same vein, you'd mentioned in the beginning how AI can be leveraged in the security sphere, specifically in the scene, right? In the SOC. in us helping those individuals accelerate their delivery without compromising the integrity of what they're doing. Um, is that really kind of the end all be all is process efficiency via this machine, or is there other stuff that maybe we're not seeing?
Well, so again, we're on the cusp of that, and what I've seen is through our experience, for example, with IBM selling QRadar on cloud over to Palo Alto Networks, we have become a Palo Alto partner as well,
Yeah.
and we've started to look under the covers of their Cortex product, and it's all AI. And what I didn't know until last week was the AI under Cortex is Watson X.
Oh,
So
okay.
I was pleasantly surprised because it ties the two things
You're
together.
like, "Oh, this seems
But
very familiar." It has a, reminiscence.
yeah, yeah, and so as much as I'm not trying to promote products per se or anything like that.
Yeah.
But what Palo Alto is trying to do is two things. One is obviously leverage AI much more to analyze the hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of events that are happening. But also they're trying to unify not just the SIM, but EDR and XDR and the SIM and SOAR, and bring all the different pieces that are have been traditionally separate products and bring them all together and have a single source of AI that is looking at all of these things and correlating and interrelating them to be able to identify events or threats or cases or breaches or whatever it may be, because you just a SOC analyst can't do it anymore. It's just too
Yeah,
much.
yeah,
So step one is we're able to gather and analyze all this and come out with and recommend. And the second step is we can actually start to, because when you get into agentic AI, I can now start to reason and actually make decisions and act on things
yeah,
without necessarily having human intervention, right? Or let me close this port. Let me shut down this email address, things like that. So
yeah,
when you start to automate that and you take a bit of a zero trust approach that says, I'd rather shut it down and then, you know, in the old days when we built the ERP or sold the ERP applications, we'd have customers say, I need to hold on to this report. And our approach when we deployed our ERP was don't distribute any reports and wait to see who chefs. Well, it's the same thing here. It's almost like zero trust. Take away the permissions,
yeah,
and then figure out when you need to grant them. Right. So selectively.
yeah.
But
I
that's where we see the AI really starting to impact in the security world.
and that's actually a pretty common. I remember when I was still working at American Express, and this was, gosh, almost 2 decades. It's so funny to say that. It's like 2 decades ago. Um, they were moving, their data center, and they were moving it from Phoenix to, I believe it was, North Carolina. And they had all of these old IBM mainframes that had been running for years, and they had these processes running on these mainframes, and the engineers were like, "We don't know what the process is doing. All we know is that it kicks off every day at this time, it runs for this amount of time, and then it ends." And so, it kinda finally D-Day came and they're like, "We gotta ship them, right? And if it breaks something, we'll have to figure it out later." And many times it's interesting because those old processes get just part of any company and they just get forgotten and they just continue to execute faithfully and would continue to execute faithfully, as long as that plug was plugged in and that mainframe kept going, that process is going to keep running. And you find out that nobody needed it. That, and often and sometimes you'll find some variation out there where somebody needs something and you're like, "Okay, hold on. We can do it this other way." Right? We don't need that report. We don't need that thing open. We can do this and much more efficiently some other way.
And this is where, again, agentic AI is an interesting tool because it allows us to help customers reimagine some business process to
Yeah.
achieve whatever outcome they're looking for. and how can you think about it in terms of when you reimagine the process, you're not reimagining it with humans running it or with processes. You're reimagining it as more of an event driven. So a customer order comes in. Oh, an agent takes that and does this, and it passes it off to this guy to do pricing, whatever it may be. And so you hopefully have processes that you've defined. If the process isn't needed anymore, you don't keep running the routine
Right.
without realizing why you're running it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And that kind of rolls into this advice around organizations that have not started their AI journey, whether it be from fear or from cost or maybe lack of knowledge or where do I begin? I was just kind of thinking back to what do I do with you, right? Like what advice would you give to an organization that hasn't started yet and or maybe is just starting? Like what would be something you feel like you could share with them? Um, you know, that you feel like would be helpful.
I always think of a couple of things. The first thing is you have to embrace change. So it's coming. If you're not looking at how you can leverage AI in your business, I can tell you your competitors are. If you
That's a
don't
good
do
one.
anything, if you don't do anything, you're going to find yourself falling farther and farther behind. That's
Yep.
the first thing. But you got to be able to have that open mind and embrace the change and look for it as an opportunity. It's not replacing people. Yes, it will replace certain types of jobs, but what it means is people have to reskill because there are other more value added types of work to be done within an organization. And and when you start to embrace that change, whether you have the skills in house or whether you reach out to consultants like us or obviously like other consultants who can help you reimagine, find the use cases where you can reimagine how work can get done more productively with better quality, faster, and so on. Because it's really about leveraging AI to create sustainable operations, sustainable business practices. So our vision is helping our customers become virtual enterprises, right? So first you have to digitize, then you can apply the AI, the workflows, and so on. But if you're able to do that, you will create that sustainable operations, and that's what's going to drive success long term. So you have to look for the use cases. You have to, either develop or leverage outside expertise to help you figure out how you can use, AI and automation technologies to address those use cases. And you have to, and you have to crawl, walk, run. So you start by finding a small use case that has a high potential and you do an MVP, a very small project that has reasonably low investment and low risk. And if it works, then you scale it to the organization. From there, you start to think of it becomes a natural thing to start thinking of other use cases that are extensions or similar of where you can start to leverage this kind of technology to drive these benefits. But at the same time, the other piece of advice is AI doesn't work without data. You need to make sure you have readily available, high quality data that you can trust to use to leverage AI.
So one of the things as you were sharing that you talked about use cases, you'd shared at the very beginning that your company had put together a product that had won multiple awards that was specifically around service desk facilitation and assistance and in the M365 sphere, which I just think is the funniest thing ever. So essentially Microsoft's product is too complicated to use. So we use IBM Watson to try. I'm assuming it was IBM Watson. Maybe it was something else in the
It
background,
was
but
Watson Assistant
it was
and
Watson. Oh,
Discovery
yeah.
in the
So
back.
Watson Assistant comes in to tell how to
Yeah.
use the product. Do you find that that's like a common use case or does it just kind of depend? Like, you know what, every company's different. They'll have their own eccentricities that need to be dealt with. And there really isn't some sort of like just rule of thumb that you could apply across industries.
I think when we first started, and IBM and others came out with chatbots,
Yeah.
AI-based chatbots, it was a natural to start with customer service. I have a transportation company, and they had 80% of the calls they got from customers, trucking company, and 80% of the calls they got from customers were, how much does it cost to ship this box from point A to point B?
Yep.
Okay, can you tell me how much it weighs? What's the dimensions? And so
Yeah.
it's a very easy conversation to build
Yeah.
with a chatbot. So customer service was always a first use case. The internal customer service, which is the Microsoft 365 example,
Yeah.
is sort of an extension of that. It's just internal
Yeah.
customers. And by the way it worked was we took all of the Microsoft documentation and had Watson Discovery ingested, and it's essentially an intelligent search engine,
Yeah.
and then Watson Assistant queries Discovery in the back and
Yeah.
answers the questions, right?
Yeah.
So those were logical. Help desk type, talking with an MSP who gets support calls from their clients that they're providing support operations to. So to be able to dialogue, a customer is off hours, they're having problems, they submit a service request, and instead of waiting for someone to call them back, they can actually have a dialogue. The AI engine can go look in the history of ServiceNow and find out, have we ever had this problem before? How did we solve it? That kind of thing. So there's those user or end user customer type support service type chatbots are very common. The first set of, I call it, useful use cases to get started, and they're fairly easy to get started with. IBM is starting to build pre-built tools like Ask HR, Ask Sales, Ask Procurement. So it's already a user or customer service, but for a very specific area. So your employees, to Ask HR, IBM likes to boast that they support, I don't know, 400,000 employees with 27 people in HR because of Ask HR. And then,
That is an amazing number. Wow.
yeah, it's quite impressive.
Wow.
And when
That
you
is
talk with,
beyond impressive. Holy
yeah,
smokes.
and when you talk with the IBMers, they swear by Ask HR, right?
Yeah.
And now IBM said, well, let's make Ask HR available to customers. Obviously,
Yeah.
they have to feed it with their data and
Yeah.
their whatever HR system they're connected to in the back end.
Yeah.
But this is what I call consumable AI. So IBM and others are now starting to build applications and solutions where, as a customer, you no longer have to build the AI or understand the AI. You just need to consume it. You just need to use it because it's part of the product. So
So
that
it sounds like that's the direction that AI as a service, as opposed to, you go build a rag or whatever to go and specialize in the thing that you need, that, service like what you're describing, which is, hey, we've already built it. We're going to charge a X percentage over normal AI usage because this is specialized AI, and now go. Is that where you see things moving? It is into these specialized, I guess we'll call them specialized AI
well,
services that are supplied by larger corporations like the IBM sphere.
well, you're actually going to see marketplaces. So IBM has their product Watson Orchestrate,
Yep.
and they have built 150 or so different agents to do various things, Ask
Yeah.
HR being one of them, Ask Sales, and so on.
Yeah.
And they're actually encouraging, organizations, business partners, to build agents,
Yep.
follow the model,
Yeah.
and then promote those agents to the marketplace so that they can be consumed by others. And
Yeah.
so now what you're doing is you're building agentic AI applications, low code, no code, because you're
Yeah.
basically saying, let me assemble agents, and orchestrate handles the multi-agent orchestration between them. It's
Yep.
all visual. This does this, does this. This is the consumable AI, and we're going to see more and more of it. And then obviously we'll see the agents themselves increase over time in their ability to reason and make decisions.
Yeah, that is amazing. I mean, it is, that, and I can only imagine what the acceleration would be like that. As I'm just thinking, sort of as a small business owner, all the hats that you have to wear. So you're wearing the financial hat, you're wearing the sales hat, you're wearing the HR hat, you're wearing the consultant hat, you're wearing, marketing hat, and now all of a sudden you have something like this that you can tap into and say, okay, you know what? I've been swirling on this thing, whatever it is. And kind of coming back to KPIs, hey, ask sales, right? Ask HR, I've got this problem. How should I approach this? Well, here are a few options for you. And here's how other companies of your size have normally dealt with this. And it, it potentially, I, I hate to say it, could like replace like what mentors are, right? Like, I mean, that's one of the beauty of a mentor is you can talk to somebody who's been there, who's done that, and that can kind of guide you in that space. But also it could accelerate delivery, like candidly, like, and because you can trust the source that's coming from. Which, to your point that you drove earlier, IBM signed it in blood. They will and I will tell you that I don't know anybody else who will say, "We will indemnify you using our product." That is unheard of.
Yeah. That's more of the models than the products per se, the granite models. Interesting RFP that we just responded to is an organization, government organization that basically helps invest in companies to help develop the economy locally and so on.
Yeah,
And they're looking for a product that what do? They take a company's financial statements, they do some analysis, decide to how to invest in them and whatnot, and they want to improve the efficiency of this process without necessarily making recommendations. And so what we've proposed to them is to leverage Watson X Orchestrate
yeah,
and Watson X AI to ingest the financial statements, interpret them, organize them, and summarize and provide the information so that analysts can then analyze and the intuitive what questions to ask and so on. There are lots of use cases that organizations can look at. They just have to sit down and think about them.
I so as we wrap up, I got 2 final questions for you. So we've been here for almost an hour. What's one key takeaway that you want people to remember? The people that are listening to this, what's the pinnacle of this conversation, or what's something you want them to know?
Uh, that's uh, that's a tough question to answer as just a one takeaway,
Sure.
because in
We'll
my
make it
mind, there's
2.
a few. But so in my mind, it's AI is coming, right?
Yep,
You either embrace the change or it's going to run you over. Your
yep,
competitors will run you over. So
yep,
that's the big takeaway. It's embrace it, leverage it. It can provide tremendous benefit if you do it properly,
yep,
right? But then sort of the corollary to that is you got to do it right. You got to pick the right use cases and you got to make sure you have the data to support it because AI feeds off of data. And if you don't have the data, quality volumes of data, you can talk AI all you want, but you won't be able to do much. AI is coming and it's coming at a phenomenal pace.
yeah,
And even we don't know. So sometimes you need to jump on the bandwagon and ride the wave and it's going to morph as it goes and you see where it takes you and how you can leverage it and but do it as use cases. Find a use case because it may not be the same AI or tool that you use for each use case, but if you're lucky, you find a good platform,
yeah.
and from that platform, you can experiment with the different use cases.
Thank you for sharing that. And as a final, if people want to connect with you or if they want to learn more, what's the best way for them to do that?
You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find us on our webpage, and I'm happy to provide those. You have access to them as well, so you can certainly share it if they ask you. My LinkedIn page is very easy. It's my name, Andy Frankel, all one word. So you look up LinkedIn dot or slash in slash Andy Frankel, and you'll find me. My email address is andy.frankel at sieinnovations.com. And if you want to learn a little bit about our Mirror product, it's www.sieinnovations.com/mirror, MIRE. Happy to connect with people, have discussions. Can we be of assistance? Are you interested in Mirror? Happy to do demos, that kind of thing.
Well, again, thank you for coming today, Andy. This has been such a delight to have you here, and kind of revisit some of these themes that we discussed previously, and talk about some new themes as well. For the listeners on the Web Method Unplugged, I'd like to thank you for joining us today. And as Andy mentioned, LinkedIn, website, email, all those work to reach out to him. We'll also include it in the comments when we post it. Until next time, take care.
Hey, thanks very much.